And now we are live. This is take two. Communication problems are solved. We are both on the same channel and same stream. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at criticalblast.com, and we are live tonight with John Arroz. John, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you, RJ?
Doing wonderful. It's been a busy week here at Critical Blast. I'm real happy to announce that. Well, you remember this little number?
Yeah.
As you participated in that. We had 10 short stories here about forgotten gods. We have just gone to the printer with a new PDF with 20 short stories for our new anthology, The Devil You Know, 265 pages. So that will be pre-sale on June 15th and released on July 1st. Really happy to start seeing that.
Beautiful.
So we're getting into this publishing game a little bit more seriously now. So we could probably take some pointers from you on that because you are a publishing machine.
Sure, happy to help.
Cranking stuff out all the time. The ones that comes to mind right away, of course, is Dynamite Thor. You've sort of discovered this, you and several other people have discovered this gold mine of unused and public domain characters. And I'm really curious about how you just go about claiming one for use. If they're public domain, I mean, is there anything you have to do at all to do that?
No, if they're public domain, you don't. You can just go right in and just do it. That's the beauty. You want to check and make sure 100% that it is public domain, because if it's not, you can run into legal problems with whoever actually owns a character. But there's a pretty good resource. I think it's called I think if you just look up public domain superheroes, there's a resource with listings and all that are confirmed public domain heroes that you can scroll through and all that. And I've done that. I scroll through them periodically just to see what zany, weird things were come up with in the 40s, because, you know, they seem to have better imaginations than we have these days. They just did not care about reality and things like that. Little things like that.
If a radioactive spider doesn't give you leukemia and breathing in hard water doesn't give you lung cancer, anything can give you superpowers.
Right. Yeah. Nobody seems to think about that today. I mean, they always try to do something very realistic with the way somebody gets powers or whatever. Aliens did it, or maybe there's some machine that's giving people powers or something like that. But they never just come up with just zany, off the wall things. I mean, what was Captain Atom blew up in a nuclear explosion, and he just became energy because of that, right?
Same with Firestorm. Two guys in a nuclear reactor. And well, it's fusion, so they're fused together.
Right. So that's a lot of fun stuff out there. And I've kind of given up on the whole realism thing. I think that's a big portion of why comics have been unfun the last 20, 30 years. And so I want to get back to the roots of when everybody was reading them. Everybody sold millions of copies of books. Everything was fun. Everything was exciting. And that I just love scrolling through that, if anything, just for inspiration. And Dynamite Thor I found a while back. And he is just an insane superhero. The whole concept is, oh, got a problem? Chuck a stick of dynamite at it. And I thought that was very funny. That's all.
And he's immune to explosions because of having worked with them for so long. I mean, he just developed an immunity to it. So he actually flies by throwing dynamite behind him and letting the concussive blast push him forward.
Yes. Yeah, the comic book hut was reviewing my book, and he says, well, it's not, is he immune to, what does immune to explosives mean? Is he immune to falling after the explosives? Because if he explodes through the air and then falls, is he going to get hurt from the fall at that point? And he's like, John never explains this. I'm like, that's because the Golden Age never explained it, because it just doesn't matter.
And you're right. They sold millions of these things. People were turning into robber barons over superheroes. And can you imagine if Dynamite Thor, we'll just say that, sold today, the numbers it sold originally, what Comic-Con would look like? It would be like Dynamite Thor, digits. And then the next one down, like 4 digits. It's like, there's no comparison.
There's no comparison.
Why is that? What did we do wrong? How did we get from millions and millions of copies of books to it's a niche hobby?
Well, a lot of things. The first is, of course, now there's YouTube and streaming apps and all that competing for people's entertainment time, video games, etc. So that sort of thing makes it so that picking up an old comic book is doesn't seem maybe as exciting as something that's a little less to do. And that's the same with reading books. Same thing. Normal books have declined in a similar manner. But we've also on the comics, like books aren't really a niche hobby still. I mean, I would say there's enough people who read books that it's a fairly normal thing. But you might walk down the street, and if I went down to all my neighbors' houses and asked them which ones were reading comics, I might not even find one person, right? And that's because of the specialty shop model. Also, I know I like to support my local comic shop. I just did a video of it on my channel. I just bought a ton of books from them because I figured, they're probably at risk of going under, and I'd like to support them, in the troubled times we're in right now. But at the same time, going to specialty shops means you are in a specialty spot where somebody has to be a hobbyist to go to the location. And you breed 3 generations of that, and you get it out of the mainstream public and consciousness, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think a lot of it would have to be price point as well. I mean, when you look at a 22-page comic for $4, and then you look at, a trade paperback for $12, you're going to get a lot more hours of enjoyment out of your trade paperback per dollar than you are for the 20-page book that's going to take you 10 minutes to skim through over a Big Mac.
Yeah, and that's why I go for full graphic novels on my crowd funds. So I try to give people enough to where they're actually having a nice read rather than just doing a single issue or things like that. And the only difference is Robotoad. I did a single issue of, but Robotoad, that's just meant to be a joke. So it's not,
fair.
It's not one of my main, I guess, mainstream lines. We'll say. But I always do the same thing because I think trade paperbacks are the way to go. Everybody kind of writes towards trade paperbacks anyway. I try to put a single issue within the trade paperback, and what I do is I do it the reverse way of the industry. I put out my trade paperbacks, and then I put out my issues online as single issues on Kindle. So if people want to only spend $2.99 or whatever and don't want to go all in on my $20 trade paperback, then they can kind of piecemeal as they feel like reading. So, but that's my secondary income after I've already done it, and that's worked very well doing it the reverse direction as the rest of the industry, believe it or not.
Okay. I do know other publishers who are having success with that as well. In fact, Hero Tomorrow, Ted Sikora's outfit, released their book as a trade paperback. Actually, they released it as the movie first, and then they released the trade paperback comic, and then they released the individual issues of the trade paperback. So they did the entire thing backwards, and it's working for them. It's a great series. One of the things, I guess, one of the dangers of using a public domain character is that the character may have fallen out of trademark, but the name of the character may not necessarily have done so. And the one that springs to mind immediately is, Dynamite and Innovation and all these other places were using the Black Terror. They were using Miss Liberty. And then there was Daredevil. And nobody could call Daredevil, even though he was first and he's public domain.
Yeah, Zorro is a similar situation. There's a company that's very litigious that takes on anybody who uses the character Zorro like that. But and they've actually lost a couple of court cases. But the Zorro story originally and the character of Zorro are in the public domain. But they've got this whole, I don't even know how it works. But they'll sue you over it. So you'll at least have to deal with that if you want to make a Zorro story.
Everybody would just call him the Fox or something else. So
exactly.
The masked marauder or whatever they want to call him. Are you going to be doing any more public domain characters? I mean, it's a deep source of characters.
It's a great source of characters. I've got so many of my own. It kind of makes it a little difficult. And, Dynamite Thor didn't do as well as Flying Sparks. So I looked at that and I saw, well, maybe I have an interest in these old Golden Age characters, but it looks like maybe other people don't have as much of an interest in that sort of thing. So I'm going to go probably explore other things and, maybe revisit it from time to time. I do a short fiction magazine that I'm putting out myself because, very few people do put out short fiction comics at this point. And I am going to put a public domain character, I think in issue number 3 of that, because I found another public domain character. I wanted to do a spy story and I found a cool spy character from the 40s. So I'll be doing that. But a short story, 4 pages. It's gonna be a 4-page short story. I don't know that I'll be doing a graphic novel with the character, just because I don't know. If people like it in the story and start writing to me about it, maybe I'll do more with it. Right.
Now, when you look at a Golden Age character like Dynamite Thor, and unfortunately, I've got to admit I have not read the work. I can't read everybody's work on crowdfunding.
Sure.
It's too expensive for me to get everything, so I get very few. Do you set them continuously in the Golden Age? Do you go back and say yes, it's still the 40s, or do you take the character but you write them here in the 2020s?
I set Dynamite Thor in the 2020s, and I made a whole explanation on how that worked. And I wanted to actually make him, because I want to fold him, because I'm really building my own superhero universe. So I wanted to fold him into my superhero universe with some of the other characters. Yeah, eventually, that was going to be the goal.
Okay.
So that's there, and so he does exist within the same universe as Flying Sparks and as the Cosmic Warrior, my new book that I just came out with last week. So those all exist sort of in the same world. I do have sort of, I'd say, tentative plans to do maybe a team or some crossovers or things like that. I did a short story Dynamite Thor crossover with Metagirl, which I gave out as a stretch goal PDF for people who back Flying Sparks. And so yeah, that was my onus in that. Now the other one I'm doing, that's the short 4-pager, I set during the Cold War. So
all right. Flying Sparks, of course, that's the big flagship title of this universe, as far as I understand it.
Yep.
For people who haven't checked out Flying Sparks, what's the elevator pitch on that one?
That's a hero dating a villain under her secret identity. So it's a Mr. and Mrs. Smith kind of concept where they don't know that they're the enemy, and that slowly converges over the course of the story. It's a pretty straightforward superhero story with a dash of romance in it, and I always liked that in my comics. So when I was looking and reading Spider-Man back in the day, I would see what was going to happen with Mary Jane and how that was going to develop. I always found that very fun. Same with Batman and whatever mistress he's working on at the time, depending on who the writer is, right?
Yeah.
Not very consistent there.
Just knows Catwoman.
Right. So I always found that a fun element of the comics, and I wanted to explore that dynamic when there's actual conflicting interests at play, because conflict is what makes fun stories. And so that's actually gone now. I've got 9 issues worth, or three crowdfunds of graphic novels. I've got a side issue of a character that shows up in there called Metaman. And I've got a number 0 issue, which is just short stories that kind of tie into it also. So we're at 11 issues done. I have a 4th volume on the way, and we're about halfway done coloring that right now. And I'm not going to launch that until it's done, like usual, because I try to get them out fast. And then I have a crossover single issue, which I actually announced on another live stream, which is going to be a crossover with Punchline. So my character Metagirl will be fighting with Versema from Punchline, and it's called Unleash the Kraken. So that'll be probably out mid to late summer.
Okay. Now, I mentioned how quickly you are pumping stuff out here, and as a writer myself, I'm not going to diminish the task of writing and say that it's easy to do. You can just crank it out. But from my perspective, as compared to drawing, which I can't do at all, I would be able to write something faster than the artist would be able to draw it. So how do you control the speed of your output when the drawing part is out of your hands? How do you find your artists, I guess, is the meat of that question.
I've met a lot of artists through things. Of course, once Flying Sparks was a success, it seems like people just come and want to work with me. So that makes it a lot easier. Before that, it was a lot harder. But I approach people, especially for short stories, because it's like, hey, I'm doing my spectacular comics and I need 4 pages to fill this out. Can you help me out? It's a really easy pitch to get artists to work with you. As far as like, I try to tell people, if you want to make money though, we have to do a full graphic novel, and I only want to work with somebody who's going to commit with a full graphic novel. So it's back and forth on that front.
Yeah.
And I've got, let's see, as far as like consistent artists I'm working with, I've got Jethro from Flying Sparks. I've got Cloves Rodriguez from the Cosmic Warrior. Of course, got Don Kent from what's his name from Dynamite Thor. Hopefully, I'll be able to do more with him. And then I've got my gal from Robotoad also, Crimson Flapjacks, who I believe will be doing a bunch more with me in the future also. So now that I've got like 4 or 5 artists, I mean, I can get a script a month out to them, or maybe 2 or 3 scripts a month. But I also slow myself down because I'm writing a novel. Usually I put out about a novel every quarter also. So
Right.
the novels take a lot longer to write. Those take me about 50 to 60 days to get done. So that's while I'm waiting on a comic script to get done, I'll be working on my novel.
Yeah, I can commiserate with the novel writing here. You don't do these things unless you find a reason to show your own stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I am, of course, the author on the Destroyer series starring Remo Williams. So
awesome.
Bully Pulpit, Continental Divide, and the most recent one, Monumental Terror. Big Picture is at the publishing house right now. It's Destroyer Books, so I'm waiting for final word on that one, the rewrites if they need them, or the publishing date. But yeah, it's very fulfilling to write a novel. But sometimes I sit down and wonder, why wouldn't I write a comic book, since I know, I mean, good Lord in heaven, comic books have been a part of my life for a while. I mean, I was reading in kindergarten and didn't tell anybody I knew how to read till 1st grade because my barbershop had comic books, and I was just reading them and devouring them. And I had a question going on with that, but now I've kind of lost track on it.
No problem. Yeah, comics can be a little bit of a pain to make. And where I've differed from a lot of indie projects, I've noticed like somebody does like an issue, and then they have trouble keeping the artist for the next issue, as they're doing things, and so they switch up artists, switch up teams in the middle of things. I don't want to do that. I want my whole graphic novel to be consistent, because I think consistency is the most important aspect of a story. When you have a consistent form of writing, you can dive into that, and whatever happens in that, as long as it's consistent, you stay within that world and you feel immersed. And I feel like that's the same with the art. So I want to work with the same artist on the same project so that it stays consistent. And I think that's the difference between finding an artist who's truly a professional and working with artists who are, kind of flaky, which a lot of them are. Believe me, I've had for everything that you see, I'm coming out with a monthly book. I've had so many start stops. I've probably had 10 times the amount of start stops as actually get created. So I spend a lot of my time sourcing artists, talking to artists, trying to get them to, complete things. There's a lot more management involved in making a comic than there is making a book, which I just do myself. So it's easier on that front, on that level. But as much as the writing goes, yeah, I can just write a script. And I would love it. I mean, I'm hoping eventually, like I write scripts so often, I'm hoping artists be like, okay, maybe John could just write a script and I'll manage everything. I would love for that to happen at some point, but it's everybody wants me to manage everything for right now. And then of course there's the formatting the art pages on the back end to make sure they're all ready for print. And every artist seems to use a different sizing ever so slightly, or different file formats, or do things just slightly differently to where, there's no just like cut and template and paste. It takes me hours to just get these ready for Kindle and on digital and get them ready for print also.
Oh yeah, it's really a pain that I never appreciated what my publishers were going through and my editors until we started putting out the anthology books. And now it's like, the thing I think that is the bane of most publishers and most editors is the little triple hashtag that people put in between paragraphs to indicate a passage of time.
Oh, I know.
It's a great tool. I know what it's for. I'll make a consistent symbol for all the stories, but 9 times out of 10, that sucker is going to end up at the bottom of the page or at the top of the page where it makes
no right.
sense. Like, damn it, that doesn't work. Why does it always go there? But it just happens. It's going to happen. When you contract with an artist for a graphic novel, and I totally agree with you on consistency. I hate nothing more than turning the page and suddenly it looks like photorealism to a Looney Tunes cartoon. Unless there's a reason, like, we entered a new dimension and oh my God, what is going on with us? But as far as just straight storytelling, it's very jarring and it takes you out of the story. But when you contract with them, do you go the route of paying them up front for all the work, or do you make them a business partner in the final product?
It just depends on the situation. I've got a couple artists that I know I'm working with them, and so I've got them on a page rate for that. But I've also got a couple artists that I'm just it's going to be our thing together, and we're going to work on the property also. So at this point, I won't take on anybody new for a page rate on the artist end. I say, look, if you want to work on something, let's develop it together. I handle the coloring and handle as far as colorists, paying them up front unless the artist also does that themselves. And then same with the lettering. So, or I do my own lettering sometimes too, just depending on the situation. So I taught myself how to letter, and I think, I'm not like top tier pro at lettering, but I'm good enough at lettering that I'm like 70% probably there in terms of any pro letterer out there.
Okay, so when you letter, and for me, lettering is, click on the spot you want to letter, choose Comic Sans font, and start typing. Do you hand letter, or
no? I do it in Adobe Illustrator. So
okay, so you're using a font of some kind, and then you change the weights of the lines. Good. I thought that people were still, sitting down the old Irv Novick way. And
I don't know many people that do that. The only artist that I'm aware of that actually does that himself is Terry Moore. So he actually hand letters all of his pages for his books, which I applaud that. I think that's incredible. That's a ton of work.
Yeah, it's very difficult to make it fit if you're going to hand letter, because you've got to be able to see in your head where it's all going to go before you commit the pencil to the page. Whereas if it's a font, you're like, okay, well, put a line break here, or just take it down from a 9 to an 8 and make it fit that way. So you're at least handling more than just the writing chores, which everything you can do on the book lowers your overhead cost.
Right. I like lettering myself too, because I like to do a final dialogue edit pass once I see the art, and it's much easier to do that when I'm actually laying it out and can see what it looks like, because there's a visual element to everything too. Even the word balloons have a visual element to them, and if I can cut words so it doesn't go on top of somebody's head or something like that, I'll try to do that, right? Because I really don't like to cover up the art as much as I can. And also I want to make the flow, because that has to do with sentences and length of sentences and all that also. So I love lettering and editing my own work while I'm lettering, which I learned. John Layman taught me to do that. So he told me he was doing that on Chew back in the day, and he said, yeah, I letter my own work and then I edit that way so that I'm getting the best out of my dialogue visually. And I thought that's brilliant. So,
and plus, as the writer doing your own lettering, you can end up fixing things if you find out you need to, such as you have character A on the left and character B on the right, but character B speaks first, so your word balloons end up crossing over each other. You can say, well, why don't I change the flow of this conversation so it makes sense?
Oh man, that drives me crazy, because that happens more often than not, especially with artists who are I guess I guess I'll call them amateur artists. Yes, it happens a lot with amateur artists, and they just don't pay attention to the flow of the dialogue and the flow of where things are going to be like that. Or even sometimes they don't even leave room for dialogue because they're just focused on their drawing and they don't even care about how that's going to go. It's a very frustrating part, and I almost always have to rewrite some of my story after getting the art back. Just is what it is.
Yeah, I had to do that with what are we grabbing the book here? Okay, well, I don't have a copy of it handy. Alice's Journey Beyond the Moon. My very first book was an illustrated novel published in England, and I had a scene where I had the Mad Hatter was at the stove cooking, and the March Hare was at the table bemoaning it. And when I got the PDFs back, the beautiful illustration she had chosen to illustrate that scene, and the Hatter was sitting at the table and the Hare was at the stove. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not what it said. And the publisher was like, oh my God, we'll have a redraw. And I'm like, no, it's beautiful. I love it. I love that Hatter sitting there like that. I just changed the characters around and had one speaking the other's dialogue. So it was, but artists, sometimes they don't pay attention to what's to the story itself. And I can relate. One of your other books that I really found visually appealing was Clockwork Dancer.
Thank you.
Now, I don't I don't think that that's part of your superhero universe, though, is it? That's more of a standalone science fiction.
Yeah, that's that actually is an alternate history. It takes place in 1890 something. I don't remember exactly what year. In northern England, and it's about a mad scientist who is why? Because it's not about a mad scientist. Mad scientist is kind of the villain. It's about the Secret Service agent of Queen Victoria, which was their sort of CIA or MI6 back then, who got this clockwork automaton from a mad scientist. And then it gets discovered that she exists, and everybody kind of loses their minds that, somebody's toying with life and trying to play God. So they go on the run, and that's kind of where we're at in the first issue of that. But yeah, I wanted to create both I wanted a character that was, for the automaton, both creepy and somebody like you can relate to and be like, oh, like I care about this. So we have like having the weird machinery with the pink tutu of the ballerina and all that just really creates a very interesting juxtaposition of images that I just feel like worked out very nicely.
Yeah, it's creepy and beautiful at the same time.
A
lot like the female robot in Metropolis.
Yes.
Who controls all the masses. So it's one of the things that it evoked out of me. And I just love all that science fiction concepts of today shoehorned into the science capabilities of 100 years ago. So, you have clockwork AI and steam powered this and that, which would bring us to something like For Steam and Country. Steampunk, very popular genre. Are you still doing the steam novels?
Yeah, I'm actually writing a novella for that right now. What I do is I've got the steampunk universe, which has 4 novels in it, and then it says 5 novels on Amazon, but one of them is 3 novellas. But I've got a main character, and she's got her adventures of what's going on. And what happened at the end of the first book is there was a secondary character who was her best friend, boy next door guy, and everybody kept asking me for adventures from him. So I wrote a novella for him, and that ended up my first #1 bestseller, and it just crushed it. So I was like, okay, I better do more of those. So I did a couple more of those. So now he's got his own side adventures as novellas, which are a little quicker and a little faster to read, also a lot faster to write. So I do those in between books. So it's like the first one of him takes place after book 1, second one takes place after book 2, third one takes place in the middle of book 3, and the fourth one takes place in the middle of book 4, which is what I'm writing now. So I'm going to do that, and then once I finish that, I'm probably going to. I'm co-writing a fantasy series right now, but once I'm kind of free, I'm probably going to write the true book 5 of that series, because I sell a couple hundred copies of that every single month, so it's still just cooking.
And that's through Amazon, or do you do convention touring?
No, just Amazon and Audible.com for the audiobooks.
All right. So, but do you do any conventions? Do you get out like that?
I did my first convention where I actually sat and sold books last year in November. And I did Wizard World out here, and did pretty well. I mean, what was cool is you'd find people who'd come up and they'd buy your entire series. So you give them a deal. You say like, hey, I'll give you, these books are $20 each, but I'll give you 3 for $50. They'll buy all 3, which is cool. So I had a lot of fun doing that. I don't know that I'm going to do that again in post-virus world, but it seems a better use of my time maybe to just focus on the Amazon stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I've got. I was going to be at Wizard World St. Louis, but they've canceled that because we're all dying left and right, and bodies in the street. But Archon is a local science fiction show around here, and it's going to be in October. So I'm still fingers crossed that we still have a world to host it in October, and I'll be going there and putting up hopefully copies of The Devil You Know and all the other stuff. So what's cooking for you right now with comics then? As far what's your next crowdfund?
I don't know. It depends on what gets finished first. So I've got 3 crowdfund books in the works right now. Flying Sparks Volume 4 is one of them. And so since that's pretty close to done, that might be the next one that gets there. But I've also got I've got a manga one, which I'm working with this female artist who's really cool. And she's about a third done with the book we're going to do. So that's getting close too. And I've got a fantasy one, which is just going to be starring a crusader kind of falling into a fantasy world as he's searching for the Holy Grail. And that's about an eighth done, maybe a 10th done. So whichever one, I told them all, whichever one gets done first is the next crowdfund, and then I'll move on to the next one after that, and we'll just keep them rolling.
So you could feasibly be crowdfunding at least 2 more comics before the end of the year and having them fulfilled.
I'm hoping to do 2 and potentially 3. So yeah, Dynamite Thor's already fulfilled for the most part. I'm waiting on the hardcovers. And then Robotoad is done. So I'm just waiting for Indiegogo to pay me out so I can, pay for all the printing and shipping. And yeah, that'll be done. That'll be out hopefully next month. So I assume it'll be out in June at least. So yeah.
Now, once they're crowdfunded, they do end up going to Amazon after the crowdfunding wave goes through, right? I mean, I can find Flying Sparks on Amazon. So is there a difference between the Amazon version and the crowdfunded version?
No. And what I do on Flying Sparks is actually put up a variant cover that's exclusive to it. And that's kind of how I handle it on that front. I put the hardcovers as exclusive also. So if you want a pretty hardcover version, you have to come to my Kickstarter to get that, is the way I do that. But yeah, the way I view the crowdfunds is it's a pre-order system, and people are helping build the business, helping me pay for all the art up front so that I can actually make these books. And then I can get it out to the world. And I want to make sure people can read these stories always. I don't want them to go out of print and have this like false scarcity where people can't discover the book. I don't think that serves anybody.
I completely agree with that. I'm assuming that, the backers, you probably have tiers where you okay, well, you get like a poster and a bookmark and all this other stuff that you wouldn't get with the Amazon purchase.
Exactly. Yeah. I loved our t-shirts for Dynamite Thor because let me see if I can find it. I'm going to go off screen real quick. But what I did is, let me know if you can still hear me. What I did is I actually made I got it. Cool. Okay. I made a retro version. I wore it yesterday. It's a little dirty, sorry guys. But I made a retro version of his costume. And this is exactly the costume that was in the 1950s comic. And we kind of did a faded sort of look to it to make it look retro also. I love it. I wear it often. So this is the type of extras that we kind of give out for the campaigns. Yeah.
You can cosplay Dynamite Thor with that thing. Just
that's right.
Some red construction paper into tubes and we got Anthony Pacheco says
also the exclusive
Flying Sparks body pillow.
Yeah, that was a trip. What's that?
It seems like everybody's doing these waifu pillows, and I had to explain to Jim Ballant and Holly Golightly what those things were because they were doing their Kickstarter for their 20th anniversary for their publishing company, and they've got the sexy characters, and I was like, so you're gonna do a waifu pillow? And they're like, what's that? I'm like, oh, let me tell you, because you could sell a bunch of them. All right, so gosh, three new crowdfunds this year probably. Novel out by the end of the year?
I should have my next. I'm waiting on the edits for my next novel. I should have another novel out. I'm hoping end of June, early July, and then I've got another one kind of waiting. I'm going to do a novel fantasy music album combo, and I've got a woman who her name's Moira Grayland. Are you familiar with her?
I'm not.
She's a professional harp and opera singer, a harp player and opera singer. So she's going to do the music for it, and she's writing songs for it right now. So we're going to try to do that. I'm going to guess maybe September-ish. And then hopefully I'll have my fantasy trilogy done. I don't know when we'll release that. And maybe one or two more novels by the end of the year also. So
you're branching out into music now.
Musical is my first thing. So my claim to fame is actually sold a song to Real World New Orleans back in 2006. So I had a band, and that we almost made it. And I still get royalties from that, believe it or not. MTV plays that periodically, and I get a check every year. It's pretty great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, whatever it takes, man. So it's just coming full circle now.
Yeah, I love doing multiple mediums, and I just love art in every form. So I want to explore everything I possibly can.
Combine it all if you can. I mean, that'd be something to have like remember the old Power records where you put the record on and you read the comic book that would go with it, and it would be like they would read the comic to you, and there'd be sound effects and music.
Yeah. So Matt Kint did one. Do you know who Matt Kint is?
I do know what Matt Kint
Yeah,
is.
he did one of those last year on Kickstarter, and he did his comic. And the whole concept of the comic is that there's this like government agency called Mind Management. They're all a bunch of telepaths who kind of manipulate people, and nobody realizes what's going on. And so so he did a record with the comic, just like you're talking about, and it had the sound effects and a narrator, and it's going. And as you read the comic, the record deviates from the story, and then you start reading the comic, and you're like, what's going on here? And it turns out that like in the story, there's a record of this like thing, and it brainwashes people who listen to it. So you are the person who's being brainwashed by the record, and that's it's such an amazing concept. He did a great job.
That is very cool. Seven in the chat has asked, is that going to be a soundtrack for an audiobook version?
It's going to be a different. So there will be just a straight up audiobook, but each chapter. So I wrote it as a sword and sorcery sort of fantasy, like an old pulpy sort of deal. And the main character is a bard. So he's going around, and as he has his adventures, he's recording his own songs of his exploits and all that is the high concept of it. So we're listening to those songs performed by somebody as each one goes through. So each chapter, and there's 12 chapters to it, will have its own song, is basically how it goes.
All right. Well, we got kind of a late start. My fault. I should have resent the invitation there.
No problem. I'm sorry. I was that was a boomer move of me, you know?
Well, you know, I'm probably the only person who does live streams that sends out the invite a week and a half in advance. So it's easy for them to get lost. And usually I'll like, oh, it's the same day. I better resend the invite. And today I just brain farted the whole thing and didn't do it. I'm sorry.
You're all good, my man. Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you again.
We've only gone 37 minutes, but it feels like we've gotten an hour and a half's worth of content out of the whole thing.
I feel like the last time we talked, I remember like we live streamed, and you were like at a hotel somewhere, and there was a ton of background noise. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was in the swimming pool area.
That's right.
Because I was living in the hotel. I did not have a home, and I was doing appearances on other shows and trying to sell the hell out of this thing so I could make the money to get out of the hotel and into a house. And now here I have a cave.
Yay! It's awesome.
And I'm happy. All right, John, it's been a pleasure. We will do this again. We won't let another year and a half slip by before we get together again.
Sounds good.
You see my open mic night slip on. Always free to jump in.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, my man.
We'll see you later.